begin to record. Okay, so we're going to study about macroeconomic equilibrium from this week and next week. So the key questions for the next 2 weeks will be this one, right? How much an economy produce output? How much an economy produce output will be the topics, our key questions for the next 2 weeks. So usually we think of that produce goods and services by firms in the economy. So firms, they have a plan to how much they're going to produce. No firms just produce without thinking anything, right? So usually they predict whether they can sell it, what they produce, right? Their products and services, whether they can sell enough. So actually, when we have this question, how much an economy produces output, we only think about the production side and at the same time, the consumption side or demand side. We call aggregate expenditure in macroeconomics, aggregate expenditure. So we're going to talk about those aspects for the next 2 weeks. And today's title called product market. So product market simply goods and services we call product market. So we're going to find out the equilibrium in the product market today. So two sector means consumption and investment. So some of you get confused. What are those all about? So let's begin from our contents today. I will show you what is these two sector, product market, consumption, investment. What are these all about soon? So just hold on, okay? Don't run away. So this is what we're going to do today. So I will begin. What are the 4 sectors in an economy? I use the word open economy because nowadays all countries, they have international trade, which means that they sell and purchase from 2 foreign countries. So there's international trade we call open economy. So I'm going to soon tell you what are the 4 sectors, and we're going to focus on 2 of them today, okay? Because today's topic is 2 sector model, 2 sector. And I just mentioned about product market. So what do we call product market? What do we call labor market? What are the money market? And how they are all interconnected to each other. So we're going to have a brief introduction about how the macroeconomics, macroeconomy is working. And then we get into 2 sector model in detail. So as I said, we're going to focus on the consumption and investment. So I will tell you in detail what are they, step by step. So when we talk about the consumption, we're going to talk about consumption function. When we talk about investment, we're going to talk about investment function. But no worries if you don't know the word of function, just meaning that what determines consumption. Determinants. What factors determine the amount of consumption? Investment, same. When you say the investment function tells us that which factors decide the amount of investment in the economy. And then the other key things we're going to talk about is this one, equilibrium. Equilibrium. If you study macro 1, prices and market, yeah, some of you know about the meaning of the equilibrium. If you don't know the meaning of the equilibrium, so I will tell you, what status we call equilibrium in macroeconomics. Right? So we're going to deal with all of this today. And if we have time, we're going to talk about expenditure multiplier. Actually, this one we're going to focus on next week. So if we have time, I will talk about this. But if we haven't, then we will deal with it next week. Right, so this is today's lesson plan. Okay, I stop sharing this and then using the white paper. So please pay attention to the camera, not to the PowerPoint slide. Right, everyone can see the white paper? Okay, thank you, thank you. Yeah, enough. Okay, thanks. So as I said, we're going to begin from what are the 4 sectors in the economy: product market, money market, and labor market. So let's begin from very basic question. We just assume 2. We use the word agent. Like this in the economy. They have households and firms. So let's think about the relationship between these 2. We know that the main job of firms is to produce. Production. What they produce? Goods and services. So when I write G and S means goods and services. So firms do produce goods and services and they sell it in the market. This one we call product market. Product market. So we have an idea about product market already. Product market. But how this firm can produce these goods and services? With bare hand? Yeah, no firms can produce things with a bare hand. They need something we often call inputs. Input. So what we suppose is that where this inputs from, we don't talk about the materials. We don't talk about material. We're not considering this. Inputs means using this material to produce goods and services. That we call inputs. So firms, to produce goods and services, they need inputs. And where are these inputs from? Yeah, from households. So each household means us, yeah, each individual composed of father, mother, sons, grandfather, grandmother, yeah, household. They sell, usually what they sell labor. Labor. Labor is simply saying that you go to some place to work. That kind of activity we call labor. Labor. So household supposed to sell labor. If this household rich enough, will sell some extra cash to lend firms. But we just consider about the labor mainly today. So this labor will be sold in the input market, or say that in the labor market. Okay, so once households sell their labor in the labor market, firms purchase this labor, produce goods and services. So we just saw the one aspect. How these things, inputs, outputs, they are interconnected. Now, let's talk about the circulation of money. We talked about the circulation of the product. What about money? When households sell, their labor to farm, this household will have, income. Often we call salary, if you like, salary. So household receive this amount of money from farms. And then these household will spend their income to purchase goods and services. So firm will raise their revenue. Okay. So this is the basic diagram to describe economic activities. We haven't had government yet. So in this paper, we just have firms and household, no government. So this status we call two sector, because we just have household and two sectors are involved in these economic activities. And I talked about product market, labor market. I haven't talked about the money market yet. Where is the money market from? Pay attention to this income and payment to the goods and services. Households receive their income from firms when they sell labors, but not all of these households spend all of this income. Some households spend some part of their income only, and there must be left over from this income. How do you call this? We call this saving. Saving, right? So we are going to we are about to talk about money market now. So again, we talked about circulation of money, goods and services. So household sell input to the firm, they have revenue income, and the firms they sell goods and services, they have revenue, and firms have to keep increasing their business, which means that they have to continue purchase more machinery, construct new factories. Where is that money from? Not only from this revenue selling goods and services. There should be some money from. So what's the source? The source of this called savings. And the definition of savings is that left over from the income after consuming goods and services. So these savings goes to, money market. Usually goes to the bank, and then people want to borrow money, goes to the bank to consult at what interest they can borrow, how long. Right, so these savings goes to money market. Like this. So determines the interest rate. So product market, labor market, money market, how these two are interconnected in the two-sector model. 3-sector, 4-sector, same. We're just going to add government onto this. So when we add government, we just call 3 sectors. When we add external sector, foreigners, we call 4 sectors. Nothing will change. Government provide us service, like as when you need a certificate of birth, certificate of marriage, red book for the land transaction, all kind of things, service provided by the government. At the same time, government do construct project, national project, like construct the national railway, construct the airport, long-term airport, what they're doing at the moment, and the seaport. Many kind of projects also done by the government. So actually government provides service And they purchase goods and services made by firms also. And when they collect too much tax compared to what is spent, there is left over from the budget. So it goes to money market. So government behaves the same way. And all of this same set will be done in foreign country. Right? So this is basic idea how we can describe the economic activities. So this one now we can say in this way, right? Y equal to AE equal to C I G and X like this. So what does this mean? Y output or income. Whenever we talk about output income, it always means national, because we're talking about, always we will talk about macro economy. So I'm not talking about the individual firm's output, individual firm's income, individual household income. Always talk about national income, national output. So output equal to this one, aggregate expenditure. So total spending in the economy, we call aggregate expenditure. The meaning of that expenditure is total spending in the economy. So just to up to this point, up to this part, right, tells us that what is produced in the economy should be the same what is purchased in the economy. Right? This one is quite important. You have to understand that. This equation identity tells us that what is produced within the economy should be the same what is consumed in the economy. When you consume when you consume this, you will pay the money. That money goes to the sellers. Income. So we have three equal amount of things. Value of output, value of consumption, amount of income. They all should be the same. So this is equilibrium condition. Equilibrium condition. So the concept of equilibrium is not difficult in macroeconomics. The amount of output should satisfy the amount of demand in the economy. That's called equilibrium condition. Right? Now, if I remove this, we can extend our curiosity to the another side. Right, we know that this is called aggregate expenditure. It's the total consumption in the economy, but consumption, we can divide it into 4 categories, depending on who made that purchase, who makes that purchase. So the first one, C, represent consumption. This one from household. Second group, called investment. This one from firms. Third group, from the government expenditure, from the governments. The fourth group, net export. This one is from external sector. I choose EX. Let's say that 14. Right? So second part of the equation tells us that we call total expenditure in the economy, total purchase in the economy as aggregate expenditure. And we want to know how to calculate this one, aggregate expenditure. So we're going to sum all of these purchases from different sectors, right? Different sectors. In the two sectors, we have household and firms. So household made the purchase. And we're going to call them C. Firms also do purchase. We call them I. Government do the same thing. We call them G. Foreigners do the same thing. We call NX. So this is how 4 sectors in the economy are composed of. Household, firms, government, foreign. There are 4 sectors in the economy. Okay, so remember that macroeconomy works in this way. Interaction among all 4 sectors: product market, labor market, money market. And equilibrium happens, equilibrium happens when output satisfy consumption or purchase. So we describe Y equal to AE. And this purchase in the economy, aggregate expenditure from all 4 sectors. So when we talk about 2 sectors, we're going to consider first 2 only, which we will do today. When we talk about 3 sectors, we will consider up to government. We will do next week and extend to the last one, NX, now 4 sector. So both 3, 4 sectors we'll talk next week. Okay. Any question up to this part? All right. So based on this background, we're moving to consumption and investment. So we get into the 2 sectors model. Yeah, you talk about inventories. We're going to talk about that when we deal with investment. So please hold on. Okay, so now next part, we going to talk about C and I, right? Okay. So at first, we're going to talk about C and then find out the equilibrium and then add up investment on top of that and then find out equilibrium again. So the process would be like that. We're going to talk about what is C. So after defining C, we can find out equilibrium like this using this condition. But we just have household consumption. So equilibrium condition would happen in this way. And after that, we're going to add investment. So still have the same equilibrium condition because what is produced should be what is purchased. Now, equation turns into this way, right? So this is what we're going to do. Find out equilibrium condition using mathematics, using graph. Defining C and I. Defining means how does consumption function look like and how does investment look like? Right, at first, shall we begin with consumption? So household consumption. Acronym is C. As I said, all four sector, they made a purchase. They purchase, but we reserve the word term consumption for household. Right? So whenever we mention C, this means exclusively means purchase from household. Okay. So what determines total amount of consumption in the economy? What determines total amount of consumption in the economy? So we say that consumption probably affected by various factors like this. Right? So don't be scared of this. It's nothing. It's nothing. Total amount of consumption in the economy composed of two parts. Some consumption, amount of consumption, which is not affected by income, and certain proportion of consumption, which is affected by income. That's the meaning of this equation. Right, so let's think about that. Total amount of consumption in the economy. What would affect? So first one, we say the income. The household have a higher income, they're likely to consume more. So we can have a positive relationship between consumption and investment. What else? Can interest rate affect consumption? Expectation of business cycle. Okay, I think income is quite straightforward. The higher the income you have, you're likely to consume more. Yeah. I think it's not a big deal to understand this. What about interest rate? This one required a bit of roundabout because we need this relationship. So as I said, Y represent output or income, right? Output or income. So this one composed of in this way. So pay attention to this, right? Tells us that income equal to consumption plus saving, right? In the previous slide, in the previous note, yeah, we say that household don't consume all of their income. They consume part of it to purchase goods and services. Some will be left, and that amount of savings, right? So household income likely to divide into two pieces. So as Doom said, yeah, this consumption decreases, then you can expect that saving increases. Consume less, save more. Consumption increases, save less. Now think about this. How does interest rate affect consumption? Then you pay attention to the saving. Higher interest rate in the economy makes people save more. Is that reasonable? Higher interest rate make people save more. You have the same amount of income, so when you save more, you have to reduce the consumption, right? So this interest rate affect consumption through savings indirectly, have a negative relationship. And what about this expectation of the business cycle? You have certain amount of income. No. What about nowadays when we are suffer the pandemic in Ho Chi Minh City? Are you going to increase consumption or decrease consumption? What's your decision? Yeah, I think many of us want to decrease our consumption at the moment because we are quite uncertain what would happen in the coming month or 2 month time. So when people think about the forthcoming business cycle is bad, likely to decrease their consumption because they want to save more for the for the precautionary purpose. So this expectation also affect consumption. What else? Another important thing people often call is wealth. Yeah, wealth. What do we call wealth? How they are different? How is it different from the income? Income is the cash flow you have frequently. So every month, every week, you have cash flow. Right? But wealth is that accumulated amount of your income. So wealth doesn't happen immediately. It takes time to accumulate part of your income. Probably part of saving goes to your wealth. So this is accumulated income. So people are considered wealthy, which means that which means that they may have higher income or low income. It doesn't matter. Well, rich people or wealthy people means that they have a lot of accumulated assets. Right? It's called wealth. And this wealth also affect the amount of consumption. Should positively, yeah. So total amount of consumption in the economy purchased by household determined by these factors. And some factors which has no relationship to the income, which means that number 2, number 3, number 4, we put here under the name of CA. And some amount of consumption affected by income, we put the second part, the way. So we have a name for this. So let me write the name of this consumption function. So consumption function composed of 2 parts like this. So the first one, we have the A. A represent autonomous. Why do we call it autonomous? Autonomous have a meaning of independent of, right? So this amount of consumption is independent of income. That's what we call autonomous. Factor 2, factor 3, factor 4. And this part we call proportional consumption. Yeah, proportional to what? Proportional to national income. So this one is about the number 1 factor. Okay, some will get lost. What we talking about? Number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. Turn the page. Yeah, here. Number 1, national income. Number 2, interest rate. Number 3, expectation. Number 4, wealth. So number 3, 2, 3, 4 belongs to the autonomous consumption part. Number 1 belongs to proportional consumption part. Yeah, some of you have a question from the beginning. As soon as you see this consumption function, what is this small c about? Why you have c, 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 and one c followed by small character a, lower character a, and what is this lower character c? This one is important. Never forget until you finish your last assignment. Marginal propensity to consume. Right, we're going to use acronym MPC. Marginal propensity to consume. Yeah, it's not straightforward. What's the meaning of that? Propensity means tendency. Tendency. Right. Still not clear. Okay, also it's about the tendency to consume. What does this marginal mean? This marginal means small. Very small. Change. If you study the prices markets, you heard about the marginal utility, marginal cost. All that marginal is related to very little amount of change. Right? Margin here you call margin, right? Margin. This area we call margin. So usually margin means is that very little proportion. Margin. We have the word of marginalization. For some people who have who doesn't have the orthodox sexual relationship, like a gay, lesbian, they talk about they are marginalized by society. Marginalized by society. So marginalization have the meaning that push to the end edge. So the marginal propensity to consume tells us that very small amount of change in the tendency to consume. That's the meaning of marginal propensity to consume. Numerically, we can describe in this way. Changes in C. This C is capital letter, means the total amount of saving divided by changes in Y. This is the formula for MPC. So what does this formula mean? You can think about the meaning of this. Delta means changes, right? Changes in C divided by changes in Y. Represent how much consumption will change when there is a change in national income. In other words, national income increased by 1 unit, how much household consumption will change? So this one, for example, 0.8. What does this mean? Means whenever this household had additional income, households in this economy will spend 80% of this additional income. That's the meaning of this MPC. Say again. Households in this economy will consume 80% of their extra income or additional income. right? So what happened to the rest of 20%? Yeah, because they're going to spend 80%, which means, yeah, there's some left over, right? Yeah, of course, yes, right. So we say that household either consume or save. So consume 80%, which means that 20% should be saved. So we use the same name, similar name. So this one we call MPS. So MPS is the marginal propensity to save. S save. Marginal propensity to save. Marginal propensity to consume. So we have one important relationship here. Okay, so MPC plus MPS should be equal to 1, right? We have this relationship. Okay. So, shall we talk about the size of this MPS a little bit? I said it's 0.8. So my question is, can this MPC be 1.2, for example? Is that possible? Or negative 0.2? Is that possible? Okay. Guang, yeah, Guang, you said if they save this one, it should be positive, right? So 1.2 plus positive then it should be greater than 1, right? Okay. So my answer to this question is that the number I gave you here is not possible. It's not possible because 1.2 means that when they have an additional income, they're likely to spend 120% of their additional income. This is not logical, not reasonable, right? Because the definition of the marginal propensity to consume is that how much they consume when they have an additional income. We're not talking about in general. On average, you may consume more than what you earn today. But in marginal, no, that wouldn't happen. So please remember that. Please remember that. The size of MPS and MPC, both marginal propensity to consume and marginal propensity to save, should change between 0 to 1. Can be equal to 1, equal to 0, but it's also not quite realistic. So please remember that this is the relationship. It's one of the important characters we're going to use soon. Right. So we introduced the idea about the household consumption. So before we moving on, now I think I need to mention this. Durable. Non-durable. Yeah, goods. So we can categorize the consumption, either consumption for durable goods, non-durable goods, or for services. So what are they different in non-durable, durable? Durable means something doesn't disappear once you consume. Car, furniture, bags, etc., etc. Anything you use in the kitchen, they're all durable. But non-durable will disappear once you consume. So many of the foods look like that, right? Vegetable, noodle, any food, non-durable, disappear into your body, create more cells, replace the dead cells, non-durable. And services are services. So you can think about household consumption can be spent into this way. Maybe you have a question about purchase of a house. Purchase of residential place. People, economists and statisticians agree that to count this one as investment. Investment, not the household consumption. So I will tell you this later on when we talk about the characteristic of the investment. So in durable goods, purchase of a house, purchase of a residential place is not included in these durable goods. House is not included. So please remember this. Right, so based on this, let's talk about equilibrium. 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 As I said, equilibrium happens when y equal to AE. In this case, C only at the moment. Say again, the meaning of this, right? Meaning of this, A equal to AE, Y equal to AE means this economy has to produce to satisfy purchase demand. Or you can say that what is produced should be the same to the what is consumed. This economy can produce than required, can produce less than required. Then we don't say that situation is in equilibrium. Equilibrium only happens when output equal to aggregate expenditure. So the calculation is very straightforward. Now think about consumption function is given by this, like this. So total consumption in the economy composed of two parts, AT plus 0.9 Y. So from this you can tell that, right, these households in this economy likely to spend 90% of their additional income. So they have very strong tendency to consume and then save 10%. And some other factors can explain amount of AT of the consumption. That's the situation. So how to find out the equilibrium in this situation? Means another way. You can change the question in this way. Find out equilibrium means how much output this economy should produce to satisfy this amount of consumption. That's the equilibrium. So we use this. Amount of output in the economy should satisfy the amount of consumption in the economy. Like this. Okay, so actually these all we don't need in the middle. So output equal to consumption in this economy. $800. Yeah, I believe that some of you get lost, certainly. Why we have 800 and what's the meaning of this? I said this is the amount of output that this economy should produce to satisfy consumption. So let's check whether this 800 is really enough to satisfy consumption. So we just replace in this way. Instead of Y, we put 800. So 80 plus 800 is 800. So this is total amount consumption. When this economy has 800 national income. So the amount of output equal to amount of consumption. So we say that this economy is in equilibrium. Make sense? So meaning of the equilibrium is like this: whether the economy produce enough or exact amount to satisfy the requirement consumption. When we add investment, you can easily guess, okay, households only require 800. Now firms also have to consume certain goods and services. So when we have additional I, this economy should produce more than this 800 to satisfy C and I. Right? You can guess in this way. So let's check whether it is really true. Yeah, later on today. When we add I, whether this national economy will increase or decrease. This mathematical one, we can describe using a graph. This is much more straightforward, more useful, more powerful. So let's check. How does it look like? So please remember the process step by step. I will. So just look at what I'm doing with equilibrium. Equilibrium in graph. Okay. So process is like that. You draw typical two-dimension graph. Vertical axis, AE. Horizontal axis, Y. Okay. So AE is aggregate expenditure, and we are talking about the C only, so we just have C. We haven't had I, G, nor NX. Okay, so how to find out equilibrium? To find out equilibrium, we're going to use this relationship Y equal to AE equal to C, right? Again. So we're going to add the consumption function here. We're going to add consumption function. And the consumption function, we assume that 80 plus 0.9 Y, right? So before we adding this consumption function here, we need to describe this equilibrium condition. So how we do describe equilibrium condition, then we do in this way. You draw one line, right? Whether it's a dashed solid is your choice. But the angle should be 45 degree. And this 45-degree line satisfies this condition. Y equal to AE. Let's think why this 45-degree satisfy this condition. Now you can assume Y1. And then move up. And here we have AE1. I ask you whether the distance from 0 to Y1 is the same to the distance from 0 to AE1 when the angle is 45. Then the answer should be yes. Yes. So this 45-degree line tests that whichever point you choose, from 0 to here, always equal to from 0 to here. Like this. If the distance is 10, 10, 20, 20, 30, 30. No exception. which means that all points on this 45-degree line satisfy equilibrium condition. So any point on this black dashed line in this graph satisfy equilibrium by itself. Then what is the slope of this question? Slope of this graph. Slope of this 45-degree line should be 1. This one is same like as you studied already this one when you were much younger than now. Y equal to X. Right? So whenever you draw this graph, Y equal to X, the slope means the number of X is 1, right? 1. So when Y equal to 1, X should be 1, Y2, X2, Y3, X3, same. Y1, A1, same. Y2, A2, same. Y3, A3, same, right? Exactly the same way. So the slope is 1. So remember that 45-degree slope is 1. Okay. Now it's time to add consumption function. 80 plus 0.1. Okay. So how to draw this? Now we say, because we know the consumption function is look like this, let's begin with the starting point of this graph called intercept, right? Intercept. If Y is 0, consumption is 80, right? Y is 0, consumption should be 80. So this is how you start drawing graph. And what's the next step? We're going to check when income increases, how much consumption will increase. This graph tells us that when income increases by 1, consumption will increase by 0.9, right? So we have a question whether the slope of the consumption function is equal to this 45-degree or flatter or steeper than this 45-degree, right? We say that 45-degree slope 1, right? Consumption function slope 0.9, smaller than 1. So it should be look like this, or the same, or steeper. That's my question, right? 42 degree. Is that 42 degree? I haven't calculated. Yeah. So you can easily guess because this one tells us that whenever Y increase by 1, C must increase by 1. But our consumption function tells us that when Y increase by 1, C increase by 0.9 is 1, which means that it should be increase smaller than 45 degree, like this, right? So I will add a slope like this with the red one. Okay. So this is consumption function. And you can say that the slope of this is 0.9. 42 degree. Okay. So after adding consumption, what we can know, because we know that equilibrium condition is Y equal to A, E equal to C. So when Y equal to consumption. So here is the equilibrium condition, equilibrium point. This equilibrium is same that we calculated using equation 800. So you can write here in this way. Okay, in this equilibrium, 800. Output, 800. Aggregate expenditure, in this case, consumption only. So this is how to do this. Okay. Yeah, so graph now is a bit dirty. So let me draw a clean one. Okay. Remember the step, Y, AE, 45 degree, Y equal to AE, consumption function, yeah. 800, 800. So as we talked before, we know that MPC always between 0 to 1, which means that this consumption function never either be equal to this aggregate expenditure, right? Nor steeper than aggregate expenditure. Always flatter than 45 degree. So whatever the marginal propensity to consume, whatever the MPC is, always close at once in equilibrium condition. What if MPC is 0.7, for example? Then we still begin from 80. Now instead of 90, 0.9, the MPC is 0.7, which means that new graph should be flat like this. So new equilibrium will happen here. You can calculate easily how much it should be equilibrium output. Calculation is not, yeah, you can, but you can think about the meaning of that. Why marginal propensity decrease from 9 to 7? Equilibrium output decreases. Why? Yeah, because, yeah, exactly. Guang said, we know that equilibrium tells output should satisfy the amount of consumption, right? But smaller MPC tells us that, this household, each household will spend 20% less, which means that total amount of consumption should decrease. So this economy don't need to produce 800 units, because that should be too much compared to the consumption requirement from the household. Right? So when we have smaller MPC, national equilibrium output also decreases. Okay, so this kind of change we call slope changes, right? Slope changes we call rotation. Rotation. Oh, sorry. Pivot. Because we still have the same starting place, and then change the slope only. It's called pivot. Pivoting. Another case is that we still have same marginal propensity to consume, but probably this economy wants to consume more like this. Due to some psychological reason, they see that they will have permanent higher income or permanent good business cycle. So they want to consume more. So in this case, what happened? Same slope to the blue one, but different starting point. Starting point should be 100 like this. So this one will be new consumption function. As a result, this economy should produce more to satisfy increased consumption. This one we call shift. So shift of consumption function tests that without changing the slope, move up and down. Same slope, up and down. Pivot means without changing the starting point, just the slope will change. If these two things combining, we call rotation. Rotation. So rotation means existing consumption function rotate in this way. Rotate in this way. Right? So rotate includes changes in intercept plus changes in slope at the same time. Any question? What's the question? Yeah, that's correct. We're going to add investment. That's correct. The reason why I spend a lot of time to explain this is because adding is just simply we add additional number on top of this consumption. So nothing will change. All analysis should be the same, but with additional factors. That's why I spend a lot of time to explain this, the simplest one. Is that all? What of those situations you mean the change, pivot, shift, rotating? Okay. So we can think about in which case MPC changes, right? Okay. So let's back to again. C we say that is MPC expectation, interest rate, and wealth. Right. So we said that these are 2, 3, 4 belongs to CA. And actually one was income. And we have MPC like this. So pivot, shift would happen whenever these things changes. So one example I gave you is that if all people in the economy expect the business cycle in the coming period would good, then they likely to consume more. If they expect business cycle bad, likely to consume less. It doesn't depend on the national income, right? So independently, regardless of the income change, people will adjust their consumption. Interest rate, same. Interest rate increases, they likely to save more. As a result, consumption decreases. Wealth also. Wealth mostly affected by price level. So when there's big changes in the price level, they likely affect wealth. So the wealth make household to change CA, autonomous consumption. And when it becomes steeper, I think some of these factors also have an effect upon marginal propensity to consume at the same time. But usually we just want to separate this effect, while it is not quite easy to do in reality. Right, so based on this, now shall we add investment? Okay, investment. So please remember that investment is purchase from, done by firms. Okay, so that's the definition of the investment. Now, we have to consider what's the nature of the purchase of this firm. Why firms to purchase something? Why? So as you said at the beginning, main task of firm is produce goods and services, and production cannot be done with bare hand. One thing they require is inputs, mean labor. And why they need worker to work? To operate. Can I say in this way? To operate machines. To operate machines. So combination between machine plus labor produce goods and services. Maybe it sounds quite complicated to some of you, but it's very simple. Now you guess you go to hairdresser to have a haircut, have a treatment to your hair. So look at what the hairdresser does. Does he or she just use bare hand without anything? Typical things, most often they use scissors, comb, and all kind of things to put on your hair, on your head for a while. I don't know what about that. But no hairdresser cut your hair or treat your hair with bare hand. Even on the pavement when you have a haircut, male students, that barber usually use scissors and comb. And if you want to have a shaving service, he must use razor. Those things we say that combination between labor, right? Means barber himself, hairdresser, him or herself, and machines. Machines here, you can, if you think the machine is too much exaggeration, you can call tools. If you like, tools. So any production activities is done under the combination between labor and machines. And the labor is from the household, machines from the other firms. So the firms, to produce goods and services, they have to purchase machines. That is investment. And machines and tools, economists call in another name, fixed. They often use fixed capital. Fixed is from the word, or origin from the word that machine is very heavy. You cannot move freely. So the machine is always there. fixed. Or once you use, it never runs down, still there, remains the same, stand still, on the same place, fixed. Capital is not money, right? Strongly decline to use in this term. Capital is not money in this subject, in economics in general. Probably they call capital if you go to the finance subject, but not in economics. Capital, always machine, tools, building, household, residential household. They are capital. Money itself, you cannot produce anything because we say that firms produce goods and services to produce, firms purchase machines, tools to produce goods and services. Can we replace the word firms purchase money to produce goods and services? That sentence doesn't make sense at all, right? Unless you sell fake money. But fake money, you use fake money, produce good. You produce fake money using real money. That also doesn't make sense, right? So money is not capital. They're not the same thing. So never think money when you mention capital. Only think machine, tools, building, desk, PC, capital. So please remember, what's the purpose of doing investment? Why firms do purchase? What do they purchase? They purchase machines, tools. For what? To fulfill their task, to provide goods and services. So those kind of purchase we call investment. In other words, fixed capital. So residential house, purchase of residential house has a very similar, serve very similar purpose to this investment. Now, typical Vietnamese building, if you, the residential house, if you're not living in the apartment, here you have road, right? Motorbike parking, building. Ground floor. Probably you were living here. You will live here. Third, fourth, fifth. Also, you have what? On the top, rooftop, you have advertisement banner. Another cash flow. You're going to use this place? Second, first, second floor, ground floor, rent. Or do your business by yourself. So I think it's very clear why economists and statisticians consider purchase a residential house as part of investment. Right? It's not gone away. Or if you don't do anything, you just hold all of the entire building, you live here, you still can use this building, have a bank loans, and do business in another place, not within your building. Because you can put this house as collateral when you want to borrow the money. So residential house usually considered as investment. Okay, so now we have an introduction about the investment. So what determines the investment? Determinants. Most important one is interest rate. Similarly to the consumption expectation of business cycle. Any cost related, so tax, for example. This kind of thing. Most important, these two things, because these two things affect this expected profitability. Expected profitability. The idea is very simple to consider, which may have an effect upon the amount of investment in the economy. Just assume that you run business, whether you're going to purchase additional machine, additional tools, extend your factory, entirely depends on what is your expected profit in the future. You can earn from doing that new investment. Whether purchasing one more machine will increase the profitability, whether purchase a new tool increase the profitability, then you're going to do, right? So profitability depends on revenue minus cost, right? So once you have additional tool, your productivity will increase. As a result, likely to earn more revenue. But at the same time, you need to spend certain amount of money to purchase that tool. That's the cost. So revenue minus cost is profit. So you expect that profitability will increase. You're likely to make a new investment. And interest rate explain this cost part. Because many of business extend their business, they need to borrow money from others, especially from banks. So the higher the interest rate, they have to return higher amount of money. So it increases the cost. Means profitability decreases. So interest rate, investment have a negative relationship. What about expectation of business cycle? This one is here too. Revenue. Even if you have this economy has higher interest rate, but everyone expect that business cycle will be good. Then profitability, your expected revenue will be higher. So in this case, profitability have positively related to the expectations. So better expectation, higher revenue, higher profitability, greater amount of investment. Bad expectation, lower the revenue, lower the profitability, smaller the investment. Higher the interest rate, higher the cost, smaller the investment. Lower the interest rate, lower the cost, higher the investment. What about now? In Vietnam, especially in Ho Chi Minh City, if you do run business, are you likely to extend your investment or not? Right? So you can easily answer that based on how the current pandemic likely to affect influence on the expected profitability. Okay. So these are the factors that determines the amount of investment. So investment function we typically describe in this way, very similar to the consumption function. You say consumption is composed of CA plus CY. We describe investment similar way, follow the similar way. IA minus BI, or some BR. So these are both I and R represent interest rate. It doesn't matter which character you use, which letter you use, it doesn't matter. Both will represent interest rate. So investment is affected some other factors than interest rate. So like as expectations, tax can be included here. And then amount of investment affected by interest rate included in this part. Pay attention, negative sign, because we said that interest rate, investment, they have a negative relationship. So we have negative sign in front. Positive sign because we assume that income, consumption, positive relationship. What B tells, like as marginal propensity to consume, we don't call marginal investment in marginal propensity to investment. We use another way called sensitiveness of investment to interest rate. Sensitiveness of investment to interest rate. If it is too long for you to remember, then you can remember in this way. How investment sensitive to interest rate, right? How investment sensitive to interest rate. I think there's no difference, no difference. So sensitiveness of investment to interest rate, or how investment sensitive to interest rate. That represented by B. So the greater amount, greater size of B tells us that investment is very sensitive to interest rate change. If the B is small, then interest rate is insensitive to the interest rate change. So you can think in this way. But what you have to remember is that even though this is the typical investment function we're going to use this week, next week, we don't consider the second part because we haven't introduced about interest rate in our analysis. So we just assume that investment equal to IA. So the second part we will introduce after we study money market. Right? Okay, so we done consumption and investment. So let's add investment to the consumption, aggregate expenditure. So now we have new aggregate expenditure in the two sector. Same equilibrium condition, AE. Now we have two sectors. So represent two sectors, you can add number 2 like this. It's up to you, not necessary, but identify that we're considering two sectors. So C was given 80 plus 0.9y, and just say that I equal to 100 because we don't consider the impact of interest rate yet. So these are the C and I. Easy to calculate equilibrium? So this is the amount of aggregate expenditure economy now. It used to be like this, right? Without firm's investment. Now, due to the investment increased by 100, we have higher aggregate expenditure. And if you still remember what I told you, after we adding investment, firm's investment, this economy cannot satisfy the purchase expenditure requirement by producing the same amount of output. So let's see after we having investment, how much it should be the output in this economy to satisfy both households and firms' expenditure requirement. So equilibrium condition is like this. So new equilibrium now 1,800. If you still remember, original equilibrium without firms' investment used to be 800 only. Now after we having additional firms investment, this economy, if this economy produces 800 only, which means that there will be lack of 1,000 output. Produce too little compared to the aggregate expenditure requirement. So this economy should produce 1,800 after firms are included in the model, right? So this is a change in the equilibrium output. Graphically, how would it change? Same. Same. Now we had Y, A, E. Now it's two sectors, so A is no longer C only. We should add C and I, and we know that C is 80 plus 0.Y and I is 100. So actually we just can add C plus I, which is 180 plus 0.Y. So we have aggregate expenditure like this, 45 degree. And as usual, we add consumption function, look like this. Right. So this is consumption function. And we can add additional 100 from on top of this. So 180. So this will be C plus I. Right? And the gap between these two is 100. Where is that 100 from? If you ask, then this is from the amount of investment. So this economy used to produce 800 like this. So this is equilibrium. Now due to the requirement from the firm, new equilibrium must increase to up to 100,000 and 800. Right? If this economy still produces up to here, still produces up to here, you can think what would happen. If this economy still produces up to here, then output is 800 only, right? Output is 800 only. But what's the requirement from the aggregate expenditure is here, which is much higher than 800. So this amount of investment requirements cannot be satisfied. So this economy must increase output up to this point. Yeah. Okay. Any question? I think that's all for today. We're going to talk about multiply effect in next week. Yeah. Inventories. Sorry. I forgot that. Okay. Remember this graph. Okay. Inventories is nothing else because he said that investment. I said that investment is purchase of machines, right? Tools. And another one, inventories. Right. So how we deal with the inventories, this is also a kind of an agreement among economists and statisticians, say that inventories is produced but unsold, right? Produced but unsold. We define inventories in this way. Why we call this one is part of investment is because if we don't do that, we cannot satisfy this condition. Because what should be produced in an economy must be the same what is consumed. Now you have inventories means produced but unsold. So where would you put these inventories? For example, 200 output produced, household consume 80 only, and the firm consume 80 only. So they're left over inventories. 40, right? So without these inventories, left hand, right hand side cannot be the same. So where would you put these inventories? So they say that these inventories, let's put under the category of the investment. So this is how we deal with the inventories. Is that satisfactory? So total amount of investment is not affected because total amount of investment is composed of mainly two things. So the graphical analysis, numerical analysis will be no change because of the consideration of inventories. Right. Okay, any further question? Yeah, one factor model and that is possible in a novel only. Too. I think is in real life. In real life, I think it's entirely not possible to have a household only, unless in a primitive world, do you think all household they do the same thing without firms? Probably in the primitive world, when they don't produce but just gather and catch a fish, hunt, probably. Household, the economy was composed of the households. But I think not all of them are talented in hunting and fishing. I think, like nowadays, not everyone has talented in mathematics, languages, architect, drawing, painting, music. So even if in a primitive society, I think in the same way. When you give a birth of 5 kids, some of them are talented in hunting, fishing. Some of them are talented in textiling, so they can make the clothes. Some of them talented in architecture, so they can construct the building. So all kind of division of labor would happen in that case. So I don't know whether we should still call this household economy. Yeah, but not in the modern society. Turk. I think it's not possible. We can guess a society composed of households only in modern society, only in the past. Income level itself, firm income level itself doesn't affect marginal propensity to consume. In the consumption function, we say we define the consumption function is equal to in this way. So marginal propensity to consume is not affected by income. This one is affected by nature of the society, whether people have really big tendency to consume more or save more. Asian countries, especially East Asian countries, they have a tendency to save compared to the Western people. So they have a lower propensity to consume compared to the Western society. So income itself have no impact upon the marginal propensity to consume. Okay, any further question? Well, okay. Or you can bring the question on Wednesday consultation session. Right, so if you have no further question, yeah, please, Guang. Yeah, please. I think that would be better. Thanks. Okay, so if you have no further question, shall we finish today's class? Okay. Thank you for joining today, and then stay safe, because it seems that, yeah, we have directive 16 from tomorrow in Ho Chi Minh City, so be careful. Yeah, consultation will always happen on Wednesday. Yeah. Okay, so see you guys next week. And if you haven't had a group, please make your group. Okay, let's say goodbye to you. All right. See you next time.